The Old Testament lesson today is taken from Deuteronomy verses 1 through 9. Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the ordinances that the Lord your God charged me to teach you to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you and your children and your children's children may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, and keep all his decrees and his commandments that I am commanding you, so that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe them diligently, so that it may go well with you, and so that you may multiply greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding to you in your heart today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand, fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. Would you please stand if you're able for the gospel lesson? It's taken from Mark, verse 12, 28 to 34. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Then the scribe said to him, "You are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and beside him there is no other. And to love him with all the heart and with all the understanding and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself. This is much more important than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And after that, no one dared to ask him any question. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. You may be seated. So what have we learned? What over the course of our lives have we learned? There's a lot of things that we learn in school, right? There's a lot of things that we learn in school that we ask the question, is this going to be on the test? Karen, why should I learn this? I'm never going to need to know this. I have a couple of kids who always are arguing about what they need to learn in school because they're like, I'm never going to use that. And to be sure, there are some things that we probably should teach each other how to do that we don't, right? I've often said that there is so much that I didn't learn in seminary about what it is to be a pastor. Sometimes you just have to do it, right? But two, there are things that we don't necessarily learn, or we get a quick lesson in it, and then we just kind of go on and assume everybody's caught up with it. So there's lots of things that we learn formally. There's lots of things then we learn informally. Sitting next to someone, hearing stories from someone. I always like to imagine everything that Jesus learned standing at Joseph's workbench, right? Not just how to make or fix things, but how to be in the world. I can remember a conversation with my dad one time when we were cleaning the little drip pans, underneath the burners. And he was showing me how to do that. But he was talking about so many other things that I needed to know about how to be in the world, right? So there are all those ways. I can remember one of our kids learning from peers how to play a particular game, right? Or watching grandma make a particular meal. All those things we learn sitting next to somebody, those stories around the table. I feel like often learning to be a family often happens around a dinner table, right? You tell the stories, right? We often, Wayne and I, tell stories about the kids to the kids, right? But why do we do that, right? Why do we, Debbie, say, when you were born, this is what happened, right? Or I can remember, Joan, when you were just this big and you came over and you said, right? We do that because we want them to have a sense of who they are, right? Of where they've come from, of what has been important to them. And many times, we learn as much, right, from the people that we are teaching or guiding as they learn from us. Because they ask questions that we have long since stopped asking. Or they wonder about things that we don't wonder about anymore. Or we say, gosh, I don't know. I don't know why when Grandma makes that one dish, she puts the wooden spoon across the boiling pot of water. But why does she do that? Keep it from boiling over. But I'd never thought about that, right, until one of the kids asked. We learn. And God willing, we continue to learn our whole lives, right? Our whole lives. I think it's a pretty dull life, Gary, if we think we've learned it all. One of the things that we have said to our kids, for example, is, the hard thing about history is they keep making more of it, right? So what if we thought, nope, today is the end of it. I don't need to learn anything beyond what happens up to this point. Of course we wouldn't say that, right? So God willing, we continue to learn throughout our lives. And so I want us today, this is not prescriptive, I'm just encouraging you, think about all the things that you've learned. Kim and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about how it is hard for us to imagine our kids younger, right? When we're celebrating these milestones for them, it's hard for us to remember that little kid. But there was a time, right? Like there was a time when my kids didn't know how to read. And then they learned how to read. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. There were times when we didn't know how to do different things, change the oil in our car, balance our checkbook. And then we learned how to do them. That's pretty amazing. So I want you to think about all the things that you have learned over the course of your life and celebrate that. Celebrate whatever it is that you're going to learn next, right? Celebrate the possibility. There are going to be things that Maddie and Dylan and our other graduates are going to be able to bring back to us and say, hey, did you know? And we're going to be able to learn from them. Like, did you know? Jim, did you know that you only put one space after the period now? I just blew your mind. It's true. You know how old you are if you hit the space bar twice after the period. One space now. One space. You just learned something. Sandy says, you just learned something. So now you can be very hip the next time you email your grandkids, right? Because you can just one space afterwards and they'll be like, oh. All right? We're learning all the time. And we forget what we've learned. We have to learn it again. How many of you, when you were younger, learned all the state capitals? Would it take you a minute now to remember all of the state capitals? Even if you learned the song, it would take you a minute, wouldn't you? The song, remember the song, right? Many of us in this room have been coming to a place like this, maybe this place, many, many Sundays throughout our lives. Many of us worshiping online have come to a place like this, or have come to a time like this, and we've learned so much, right? We've learned so much. We've learned different theological terms, right? We forget different theological terms. We learn about how the United Methodist Church is organized. The United Methodist Church changes how it's organized, right? So what have we learned? The wonderful thing is that Jesus says what's important is that we learn two things. That we are loved and that we are called to love. That we are loved and that we are called to love. So God gives us all this wonderful stuff to know and learn, and He gives it to us. God gives it to us with the intention that we would have a life that flourishes. I'm giving you these things, and I'm telling you to teach each other these things and to share these things so that you can have this wonderful life in this fantastic place that I prepared for you, and so that things will go well for you, that you'll flourish, that you won't just kind of make it through, but that you will delight in it, right? I'm telling you all these things. And then Jesus comes along and says, and I'm going to boil it down for you. But remember that as Jesus is talking to the scribe says the same thing. This is a tradition that goes back, right? This is a tradition that goes back to Deuteronomy and Leviticus. There are two things we have to remember to do. Love God and love our neighbor. So you can forget a whole lot of particulars if we remember to love God and love our neighbor. If we can remember that we are loved and that we are given the opportunity to love in return. Lauren, that's the easiest test we can imagine, right? Is this going to be on the test? Well, if you want a life of flourishing, am I going to need to know this? When am I ever going to use this later? Well, if you want a neighborhood and a family and a place that is full of abundance, yes. We are going to commission our summer camp team in a little bit. And we're going to say a little bit more about what it means to love our neighbors. But the thing that I've been wrestling with all through annual conference, as I heard different speeches, or watched different videos, or worshiped, if it is so easy that all we need to know is that we are loved and we are called to love, if it is so easy that all of the rules boil down to this, love God and love your neighbor, then why are things so hard? And the thing that I've been wrestling with is this. I wonder if the thing that we have learned, not learned, or learned partly, or learned wrongly, is love. I wonder if we don't always know what that means. I wonder if we have not always had an experience of that in the fullness and healing wholeness that God intends, but we've had a different experience that's been called love. So as you think about all the things that you have learned, the thing that I want you to do as well is to wrestle with this. How have you been taught to love? What have you been taught that love is? How have you experienced love? How have you shared it? Because I wonder if that is the thing we need to wrestle with before we learn anything else. We're going to talk about this more, but today I'm leaving you to wrestle. Now, this is not like the Bible story limb. I don't want anybody to say, and they were afraid to ask her any more questions after she said that. Because I want to wrestle with it with you, right? Because I have a feeling that there are things I can learn from you as I've been wrestling with this. So let's think about that. What does it mean? Because it sounds like it should be so simple. What have we learned? We are loved, and we are called to love. So what is love?